Hello, everyone. This is Dwayne Newstater, and welcome to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And my co-host, as always, Tony Tresselt. Hey, Tony, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Dwayne.
Good. And our guest on today's show is a special guest. I've known this individual for a long time, and I don't think he really needs an introduction, but we'll give him a bit of an introduction and then let him introduce himself. But I'm really pleased and excited to have with us Mr. Tobe Sherrill. Welcome, Tobe.
Thank you, Dwayne. Hello, Tony.
Tobe, you're coming to us from, I think, from your home domicile in Greensboro, North Carolina.
That's right. Good old Greensboro.
Home base, which I think you've been that location for quite a while. For those of you that don't know, I'm just going to pump his tires a little bit here. And I don't know that he needs this introduction, but I could share some details, which I know that would upset him, so I won't do that. But Tobe is I don't know if you are the founder of Sherrill Arborist Supply, but you're definitely the most notable Sherrill with the Sherrill name and with the Arborist Supply Company that's gone on to great and wonderful things. But one thing people may or may not know is that you are actually the inventor and the patent holder of the Big Shot, and that's an interesting story, which maybe we'll get to, among many other things. And that is you're a wonderful father and a very proud, wonderful husband and a very proud father. I think you're probably a proud husband too, and have been living in North Carolina as long as I've known you. So, Tobe, I'm sure as we go along, you'll be able to fill in some of the details that I've messed up on. But we always start off by asking people the first time they remember having a connection to trees, where trees made some impression upon them in their heart, their mind, or in other ways. So if you could think back to the first time you got a memory that connects you to trees.
I think the first connection I remember is here in Greensboro. Of course, I was born and raised here, so in the city, and I used to climb this beautiful white oak that sat in the front of our house. And
Oh, wow.
And once I got into Boy Scouts, we got into ropes, and I started using that tree to tie stuff. And then I met one of my future customers who had a stump grinder who came and ground a stump at our house, and met another tree service that was working at our neighbor's house. This was an unusual event when they were roping down a tree, and the ground guy, this must have been 1972, 73. The groundman was holding the rope, and they dropped a log out of the tree, and he soared up into the air, and the ambulance came. Yes, he was smacked by the log. So those were some of those. Yeah, those were some of my initial memories. But I think the thing that was more important came later in high school. I did for my senior project tree identification up at a school that I went to in Sparta, North Carolina. So that then I learned names and species of trees. I was already interested, but yeah, so that's how things came along for me in the tree care industry.
So you watched a struck by, the most common thing that happens to tree workers. I guess you have no trouble believing that.
It was shocking, for a kid to see that. And of course, none of these guys had helmets on back in that day and time. I'm surprised they were using ropes, but I think they had to control the drop to not hit our garage. So interesting introduction to trees.
And then you don't know the outcome of the injury. It was just he just disappeared, and that was it.
Correct. And I was probably off to throw a model out of the house again. The stuff you do as a kid back then.
You can't now. I'm curious. You would make model airplanes, or
yes. I had a collection of model airplanes that I made as a kid, and there came that time when I was 13 or 14 that one by one I taught them to fly.
And did any of them fare better than others, or?
Oh, no, none of them flew. So I had to add, glue and a lighter to it. So they began to fly on
Oh,
fire. I'm sure my father was just, what do I do with this
well, I
kid?
mean, then it truly would be a proper simulation of a crash.
Yeah, of course.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense to me. I would have been if I would have been there with you, I would have figured let's tear the tops off of some bullets and then add gunpowder to the glue.
Done that. Well, not to the glue. Oh my
Right,
gosh.
right. Tear the top off bullets. I wonder whoever has, yeah. Just to get your hands on a little gunpowder, you'll destroy a bunch of bullets.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm guilty of that a few times. Um, so when you mentioned the tree ID, was that an optional course or is that something you took, or how did you end up taking a tree identification class?
In high school, they give you the option for a senior project, and I had been fishing on this lake that was you had to hike to get through the woods to this lake. And I don't know, I just took interest. I had interest in trees, of course, and so that was maybe a precursor to what was coming. I didn't have any connection further than that and Boy Scouts, and I'm sure we had some identification in Scouts, but yeah, we were always climbing trees, and of course, on trails when we were hiking, it was quite common for us to jump off the trail into the top of a magnolia or something flexible and ride it to the ground, as kids would do.
Right,
I
right.
remember doing that, but like a lot of people probably did. And you?
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't remember jumping off trails on the tops of trees, but I remember learning how to ride a spruce down after doing some shaping on a spruce. If you once you had to go right to the top with a couple three sections of pole, and you'd go down around, kind of making anything that just to kind of tidy up or shape the canopy for a more formal look. But when you were done, the fun part was that you could jump off and then go from each bough would bend on if you lean back just the right amount with your arms spread, give you enough resistance. You literally slide all the way down the outside of the tree. But if you lean too far forward, it would spit you off, and you didn't want that happening. But if you timed it right at the end, you could get it so you could land standing, which was the idea. If you were really, worth your salt, that's how, the cool guys did it. But you of course would watch it a few times, you know, think it's crazy, and then, your day eventually would come where you joined the fool's errand of trying to ride. Uh, Although it was relatively harmless, I never did see anyone get hurt. But um, I probably wouldn't be as keen to do it anymore. I think I'd be a little more nervous about the consequences. I don't know if that would be the same for you jumping into a magnolia these days.
Certainly, and I had no need to destroy trees anymore.
Oh, they would break.
Well, it would. I'm sure they didn't all appreciate it.
Right, right, right. Well, while we're on crazy things we did when we were young, tell me what's your craziest young tree adventure?
I was being the youngest of three. I always got duped into like my older brothers would grab a sapling and like bend it over and pull it to the ground, and then they'd be like, "Tony, Tony, you have to come over here and help us." And I'd grab on, then they'd let
Yeah.
go, and then it would like I'd ride the tree up in the air. That was yeah, I was a victim of that a few times.
Wow.
I like to say I was only the victim of it like maybe two or three times, but it was probably more than that. Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
kept falling
because you
for it.
realized it was fun.
Yeah, well, each like as with brothers, like or just boys in general, first it's a small tree, and then it kept getting progressively and progressively larger until it probably got downright dangerous. But man, it was all right. But yeah, that was it for me. Other than that, I tried not to fall out of trees.
Well, Toby, your journey then from trees, learning them and learning what kind they are and how to identify them, uh, did you expect your career path? I don't know even know if you would describe it as obviously it's got a tree connection. But has it always been based on that connection to trees? It's just, and how did that happen? How did you evolve into the tree world, let's as they say?
You know, the the more foundational things in my life were being outdoors, Boy Scouts, um, hiking, camping, um, and I grew up in the country until I was 11. We moved into the city, and you kind of miss it after you kind of change that way of living.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know if there was another connection that was any more significant than those to getting into the tree care industry. Growing up, my father was a manufacturer's rep, so he was the man of hardware, and part of my job was to when the new season came was to take a box with a lawnmower in it and put the mower together, get it ready for him
Oh,
to show to his different clients. And so, I was always around hardware, and I like to be
okay.
outside. So that was, and I was a good Boy Scout, and I appreciated that. I didn't graduate as my father would have really liked. He was still harping on it when I was just about to turn 18. I did not become an Eagle Scout, so, and he was. So, but I think the connection was just being outdoors a lot.
Uh-huh. So were you always like many of us, did you stay connected to the family business like most like a lot of sons do with their father's business, like working at it kind of as a have to when you're younger, but then, choosing to stay involved?
Exactly. Much like sailing boats. My parents loved to sail. I hated it. But when I grew up, that all changed when my parents passed relatively early. So, my mother especially. But so I learned to appreciate those things. And with his
Okay.
business, kind of never thought I would be in it. But I went to college and studied business and then commercial design and just at the beginning of computers. And so when I finished school, I really had no job lined up, and he asked if I wanted to come and work with him. So I thought I would do that for a couple of years, but 1 year turned into two, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, you never really, in a way, never really left, did you?
That's right. Going straight from school to there.
So the original business, the family business, I've heard you describe it, I think, before as a mercantile.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Well, being a sales rep in hardware from tractors and lawnmowers and kitchen knives and lawn furniture, he was a jack of all trades. And when I came out of school, I thought I would, do this for a little while before finding something else.
Uh-huh.
But I got into it. In the first few years, we again were the jacks of all trades, and it was really hard for me to get my head wrapped around one product before we would jump to another. And I was going to visit typically men in hardware atmospheres that knew more about the products than I did, oftentimes. And so,
Mm.
and when you jump to a new product, it makes it that much more difficult. But it was rather uncomfortable. It was in a had to wear a tie and blah blah blah. And he had a friend up in the north who's who was older than I, but his father was an older friend of my father's, and he introduced us to a new line of stump grinder that was called ProMark out of California. And we took on that
Uh-huh.
line,
Yeah.
and he told us that, the direction to go with this was selling direct to rental stores. And so I started knocking on the doors of rental stores, and one after the other, they would buy a machine. And within 3 or 4 years, this was back in the middle of the 80s, 86, 87, we got into the rhythm of selling stump grinders and chippers to hardware stores. And then we started adding on other products that made sense for them. Pressure washers were popular. And I sold equipment like that for about 4 years. And I started looking at the things that were important about the tree care industry, because I really enjoyed the using the stump grinder and demonstrating it and the chipper, and understood the mechanics of it
Right.
and everything. So that's kind of how the business took off into the tree care industry from, like I said, all this uh, hardware equipment.
Interesting. ProMark, they're still around, I think, aren't they not?
I don't think so. They were bought out by Gravely, and I think Gravely eventually dropped the name.
Right, because they were green. They were the lime green color, weren't
Yes,
they?
they were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember one of the first stump grinders that you know what? This is kind of funny. I just thought of this, but it was from a rental store. We would rent it, and we rented it so much we finally just bought it. The same machine
Okay.
because we'd end up keeping it, and we ended up buying the rental machine.
That happens a lot.
And it was a Pro Market. It would lock one wheel. You had a brake for
Correct.
one wheel,
Yeah.
and then you just fired her up, and you just manually shuffled her back and forth. You could really get it into some time. You got good at it. You could really hum that thing.
It was a workout, though, for sure.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think about it now, and it makes me cringe. But I mean, I'd sling that sucker for an hour straight and get a good sweat on. Think it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. It was a workout. So we had that line of products up until '89, which is when Hurricane Hugo hit Charleston, South Carolina. And we were probably selling, 100 machines a year. And I bought a camper for $2,500 and hitched it to the back of my truck and drove it down to Charleston. And I'd set up camp at a rental store. And from that advantage point, had equipment shipped in, and I was, supplying the rental stores, of course, but also supplying many tree services that came to the area, and that lasted for almost 8 months. I was living down there, and I would come home to visit. But so I left from Charleston and had made enough extra money to buy a computer. And I taught my dad to let me invest in a computer for the company. It was 10 grand. That was a lot of money back then. I needed a scanner and a
Yeah.
printer, the computer, of course, and the monitor and all this stuff. And, I was fortunate that my father, let me do the things he thought I would succeed at. And then I went into the closet and learned to use the computer. That took about a year.
Okay.
And then came out with our first catalog in '91, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the catalog. I think it would be worth spending a bit of time talking about the catalog because I've heard you say it, but maybe refresh us here on how it was really kind of pivotal, wasn't it? Like it was something that was quite unique in how you did it, and I don't know that it was the first one, but it was certainly the first one done in a certain style, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. When I bought the computer, of course, I was aware of the other catalogs in the industry. One was Carl Kummerling, as you might
Yeah,
recall.
yeah,
My friend Mike Kaufman of Westburg
yeah.
was a ProMark rep, and he had someone make a catalog for Westburg.
Okay,
And I was like, man, I could do this. I was a commercial design major, had all the mental tools, but I didn't have computer skills. I just had to build on that. And when I was in college, I worked in advertising for a newspaper and pasted up advertisements for different things in the paper. So I understood sort of the pasting process and building
yeah, yeah.
paper products like that. So it just made things a lot easier. And Anne was a photographer. My wife Anne
Right,
was
right.
a great photographer, and she took pictures. And we literally would go into the shop on a weekend and close off all the windows and set up a little studio and take 150 pictures, and we would get them developed during the week. And then by the next weekend, we would know what we had to shoot over again. And that would go on weekend after weekend after weekend because there were a lot of shadows. And this was all film. This was before digital.
Right.
So it was a lot of film to sift through, and it was such guesswork to know if you had good shadows or bad shadows and if things were going to work out. But yeah, she helped a lot. I'm sure she remembers those days
Right.
sort of fondly and sort of not fondly.
Right. 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 And then I guess you would have seen quite a remarkable change in efficiency with digital photography and the ability.
Oh man, when digital came along, it was a God save. I think that was probably around '94 or '95, and that made the photo sessions for the catalog a lot better. But and then at night I was writing copy, wrote all the copy. I pasted up all the products, and back then with my Macintosh, it was PageMaker was the program that I assembled the catalogs in. The first catalog I took to the printer was on floppy disks.
Wow.
Remember floppy disks?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was a shoebox of floppy disks that they had to insert into their computer in the perfect order, in the order that I put them in the shoebox. And I'm telling you, the shoebox was full. It was probably one and a half shoe boxes of floppy disks. And out came a catalog. I loved that process. That just drove me to see that and to have everything in order, page by page. It was very fulfilling. And yeah, I like the act of adding the helpful information as well. Back in that time, before our artist, before I met Brian Kotwicka, I was clip arting a lot of stuff, and things that were about tree cuts and proper methods of tree care, because I thought that would be helpful to customers.
Yeah. That was probably something new too. I think that was where you had, up until that point, I think catalogs which did exist, but they literally were cut and pasted, then photocopied, like a piece of typewritten data stuck onto another piece of paper with a picture stuck onto that, and then that put on.
You're exactly right.
I remember making handouts like that at college. Like, cut and paste made so much sense when it finally came out digital, because that's literally what we did. But what was unique, well, two things, I think. One, there was information education components. So you add an educational information component to the catalog. So it became in a way, an educational resource. Well, very much did. And then also the passion around it. I think that says a lot for something's success. That it doesn't really matter what it is. Not that anyone would have seen the blood, sweat, and tears that went on into producing it directly, but it would have come through. I'm going to step out here and say it came through energetically in the product, and then it wouldn't take long for anyone to meet you some way, somehow, or, either on the phone or in person, to realize that this is really someone's love. It's not just it wasn't just, it was, I mean, it was a livelihood and it was your job, but you really loved it, and that came through, I think, and was part of its success.
Absolutely. I think I know you're right. I mean, I did. I love the industry. I love I had a lot of respect for the workers, the people who ran these businesses, and love trees. So all those work together well. And I felt like, I was quick to recognize bad tree work once I was really looking up a lot. At that time, early on, I wasn't climbing. I took that up maybe in '92 or something. But I recognize bad tree work, and it's all over here in the South, the Mid-Atlantic region. A lot of topping was going on. And so, I kind of went after that in the catalog. And I definitely got
Yeah.
blowback. And I remember a phone call from some guy in California. California, I thought, well, this guy's going to have something positive to say, but it was like, my father's done it this way, my grandfather's done it this way, about the topping issue.
Oh, wow.
I'm not going to change, and I don't appreciate you saying, outlining this stuff. I said, sir, I'm just pretty much outlining what is coming from our scientific sources. Um, Yeah,
Right.
from the ISA, acceptable pruning practices and such. So I remember having that more than once, and I appreciate other people's opinions, and I think I respect them. So that's all you can ask, is to respect someone's opinion. And if they didn't like that piece of the catalog, I totally expected them to move on, buy from someone else.
Right.
But it went well, I thought, in those early years, and there were other things that we could highlight so far as safety and such, that wasn't necessarily the biological side of tree care, but I enjoyed all those little aspects of it, and I think we were kind of early on to take on some safety equipment, chainsaw chaps and helmets and protective gear. So
Right.
it was all a very interesting time. When I look back at the old catalogs, I was like, is that as far as we were in '92? Because it felt like it started even earlier than that. But yeah, we went through,
Right.
when I came in, I think 3-strand rope had just fallen out of the industry, and Arborplex was new. I do remember when New England's Hy-V, or Safety Blue and Hy-V being the more popular of those two ropes, the orange and white one, came along, and
Yeah.
man, people loved that. I remember when Throwline not just began, but it was so satisfying to introduce a customer to that product, because nobody knew about it at one time,
Right.
and then it became. I mean, I remember writing that whenever there was a phone call and someone was asking, "Well, what's new? What should I try?" And I would say Throwline. It was a sure thing that they would call back for the next idea. But you guys remember how important that was in the industry. And I think Don Blair is responsible for the throw weight. It's my recollection that he went to New Tribe to have New Tribe make him that throw weight. That was after the Johnny Ball. Remember the rubber ball?
Yeah.
We were selling that for a
Yeah.
while.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so things changed a lot.
Is that what it was called, the Johnny Ball? I
Yeah.
think it was. Yeah, that thing, you didn't have to be good if you were lucky with the Johnny Ball, because it would ricochet, ping, ping, ping. You never knew, and sometimes it just worked out.
Yeah.
but sometimes it would go in places unexpected.
Yes. But it wasn't destructive, which is a good thing.
Well, I don't know. I learned how to do some pretty good window repairs, and yeah, you had to be good at Johnny Ball window and siding, and
Yeah.
slate roof repair.
I saw it not go through a windshield, but it replaced the windshield for sure.
It was big enough in diameter that it had less of an impact. It wasn't so heavy, and it was large in diameter. So, um, yeah, I think the soft throw weight was a much better deal.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There definitely was a game changer. Now, if memory serves me correctly, you found the process of throw lining, like the technique and learning how to do it, rather frustrating a little bit, which kind of led to your a desire to solve that problem.
Yeah, everybody was somewhat frustrated about throw line. You have those times when you need to shoot through a very narrow window to get to the branch that you want to, and if you don't, you're going to have to climb. You're going to have to take a lower branch and climb and throw and climb and throw. So yeah, the higher you could get in a lot of situations, the better. But I think the experimenting with throw line and climbing at that time, I probably started in around '92 or so, and I really got into it, and I would enjoy doing that whenever I got a chance, especially in my own yard here in Greensboro. But then I remember the Germans coming over with with their ideas, and they wanted to order several crossbows, and we did. we ordered like 5 crossbows, and I kept one, and they kept them, and I thought this thing is just way too dangerous, and it's hard to deal with in small trees and
Yeah, yeah,
whatnot. So yeah, throw line was always kind of cooking in my head. What's a better way to do this? And we tried slingshots, and there was like a slingshot pistol.
yeah, yeah,
Do you remember that thing?
yeah,
That was
yeah, yeah.
probably in the mid '90s. The Big Shot came along in '97, and I was literally packing a box to ship out to someone, and I'd been cooking on this product or some way to make this work easier um, for a long time, and I went to reach for a wire razor. Remember, Jameson used to make
Yeah,
this S-shaped wire razor, and it
yeah,
was black iron, and it went in the ferrule of your fiberglass pole.
yeah.
I picked it up, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, I just saw the shape, being for a slingshot, or the slingshot needs to go in the end of the pole. I think that was the first thing I thought, but the,
Yeah.
the shape and everything just pushed the thing along, and within days had a local metal shop, building me about 5 of those. And I went out and tried it, and first one was maybe too big, and then but I narrowed it down really quick and had it ready for the TCIA show in the fall of '98, and had them make 100 units, and we put the rubber straps on them and the pouch. And this was when the pouch was a leather,
Right.
just flat leather
Yeah,
piece.
I remember.
If anybody's still got one of those, they should hold on to it. But we sold all 100 units. I was like, yeah, it's going to work. But those things, when you think of them, they're so simple and straightforward that it's going to work. And I went for the patent before I ever really, um, went for the patent right away, knowing that I'd never seen anything, especially that was convertible for a stick.
Right.
But the patent was based largely on the horns pointing back down to the ground. That was the unique thing about the Big Shot that was patentable. All of the slingshots were made to, the horns go vertical to the ground, or just don't point back down to the ground,
Right.
which was really the way to make that product work. But so that's been a fun ride. Um, yeah.
I have a short story which leads to a question. And I was taking this team building event. It was week long course on team building, and it was called Ultimate Leadership Camp. Anyways, at some point, one of the tasks was you're put in teams, and we had to shoot these tennis balls about a football field's length and hit this barn at the end. And the first team to hit it, would win a prize. And then you're given this pouch of supplies, and there was surgical tubing and some other stuff. And my brain was just right away, we got to build a big shot. We got to build our own big shot. And there was I was really quite disenchanted because I didn't win. And we didn't win first and everyone thought it was a great idea, but the problem is getting the two tubings the right length to tie to a makeshift pouch that we'd made in order that it wouldn't shoot left or right or do all weird shit. And the team that figured it out first was they'd cut it in half. One person held it, the other person held it, and then they tied them together with some type of, and then and flung it that way rather than trying to put it into a holder. And that way they could adjust for the length easier.
Okay.
And I thought to myself after that event, making that thing had to have a bit of trial and error to get those tubes the right length lined up so that they stretch equally and fire equally. Because if they're even just a little off, you ain't shooting straight at all. I know that for a fact. How did you was it just a series of, and then to get it to tie and attach, that it must have been a bit of a job.
Yeah, I don't recall it being too difficult. You can easily get the tubes the same length if you tie onto the pouch first,
Right, right.
and then it was just a matter of slipping it over the irons. But no, I don't remember that being an issue. I do remember going to the local college football field and seeing how far a throw weight went. I was stunned. I was able to cross the entire football
Yeah.
field with like a 12-ounce weight. So, and then when you tie string to it, that slows it down. And then you tie, your full throw line to it, that slows it down. But yeah, I was always tinkering around. Once we had the product out, I was always tinkering around with the right weight and maybe a lighter string, and then the fishing rod technique that came along. That picked up at least another
Yeah.
50 feet of elevation of height. And you may
Yeah.
recall us using that out in Oregon on the Bugachil spruce
Yeah.
where I first met Tony.
Yeah, I remember that because we were shooting, what was it, like 60-pound test and like lead sinkers, probably 4-ounce lead
Yeah,
sinkers
Yeah.
up. And then
fishing.
Hank Rip was running it, and he set it up there, and then you had to run a lineup you could actually see. And then it was quite the process, but it was
It was
cool.
one line, then a second line. Do you remember? I got that shot on the first try. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a rarity, but it was like a 150-foot shot with the fishing line.
Yeah. I think it was more. Was it 170 some? I thought it was.
It was a high shot.
It was. Yeah. And then up at the throw line, the zing it, and then the climbing line.
In the later years in 2000, early 2005 was the first time I climbed we climbed, Bugachil climb was 2004?
2002.
Two, okay.
Because ITCC was in Seattle that year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a fair amount of that. But, for that height of a climb, the guys that are doing that regularly are using Crossbow. And they'll get a 200-foot
Right.
shot up.
And that's without using the fishing line then.
No, that is a fishing line. It would be a fishing line mounted to the Crossbow.
Okay.
Our friend Steve Sillett,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that he's ever picked up a big shot, but I was privileged to climb with him in that after the recreational catalog in 2005. I met those guys.
The downside of the Crossbow is you couldn't shoot less than a full pull.
That's right.
It was either all on or all off, so it was never applicable beyond like 100. If you didn't have a 150-foot shot, it was useless.
You would have to add weight to the arrow. Yeah.
And then the accuracy went to hell. So the beauty of the Big Shot was that you could shoot it 50 feet in the air, just don't pull it as hard.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was easily to modulate its power.
That's right.
It was a little difficult to hold it at full power. And but the release has actually worked quite well. And that was an evolution as well.
Yes. Originally we had the string, the Wishard snap, which worked pretty good.
Yeah. It did.
Going the next step.
It did.
This industry is relatively small when you look at population of people and of other industries. It's relatively small. So to produce a product made for the industry, well, it was then. Nowadays this industry is much bigger than it ever was back then. But if you had a product that every tree service in the United States could use back in 97, 98, it would only be about 2,000 products, and you never get 100% customer use. So it just wasn't that large.
So is it, Toby, what do you think the reason for that is? Is it, I mean, I don't think there's that many more trees. Is it just more tree awareness, or why is there that many more tree companies?
It's become more of a production. Well, it's just the population has nearly doubled since 1980 in the United States, isn't it? Isn't that correct? Somewhere in that. I used to think about a motorcycle trip I took across the United States and how we didn't feel so threatened by vehicles. But I think at one time I looked up the population of the states since 1980, and it had nearly doubled So there's just a lot more people, so a
Wow.
lot of housing need and tree work to be done.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned it. It's one of the reasons you mentioned the smallness of the industry is what I mean, and we think of that in the one of the reasons we call it the human forest. And you know, there's the global forest of all the people of the world, but the arborist community, the forest. That's another forest. Those trees that are people that care for trees, that those species, if you will, that intermingle and interconnect. But I think that one of the reasons, obviously population is one of them, and is a main one. But I also think too, Toby, that awareness through things like your catalog and even well, I mean, that's kind of where I go back to where it started, but just the awareness around tree and tree care is increased as well. So with that goes the need for care and so on. But, I don't know that there isn't a lot of companies, how do I put this? You're one of the as a supplier to uh, people need equipment to do stuff, whatever it is you're doing. And if you need tree gear, there's only a couple places to go. And one of the first easy to access places was the catalog and your location. Because if I remember correctly, mail order was kind of a big deal for quite a while, or maybe it still is. I guess Amazon's proven that to be the case.
Well, mail order's always been big. It's just been the way to get, especially in our industry where you have such specialized products, and not something you can go pick up in town. I mean, it was almost necessary to call an arborist supply house like us or American Arborist or Coomerling back in the day
Yeah.
or whoever that may be, to get the products that you need to work safely. And
But you would have probably seen or been aware of the amount of companies out there more than anyone else. I would think sooner than anybody else would have been.
the number of tree services.
Well, yeah, people doing tree work, loosely call them arborists.
Yeah, and up north they were plowing snow in the winter and doing tree work in the summer. Yeah, but yes, we tried to keep a tab on how many tree services were active in the country. We always came across that we're working that number when we were about to ship out a new round of catalogs.
And with that number, I would assume, I know from the business I'm involved with, like our database is exceeds that quite substantially than that of what ISA membership would be.
True, for sure.
Yeah, there's not really like, to think that you have a good handle on who's practicing tree care. You can't really look at the association membership list for that. It doesn't. There isn't. It's a percentage, and it's not a fair estimate of the amount of companies actually practicing tree care. If you look at the members of TCIA and or ISA, but if you look at who's buying chainsaws or a certain type of chainsaw, and who's buying spurs and who's buying the odd rope, you're going to have a lot better idea of who's doing tree work, right? There's a few things that are indispensable to anyone that does tree care. One is a chainsaw. I don't know anyone yet that's so pure as to say they use their axe and their crosscut on everything. But what would you say, Toby? What would be a flag for you in your experience for just based on what they put in for an order, the level of training and education they may have in proper tree care? Would there be a correlation? And well, based on what a customer may order, I would think you'd have some idea of, like, if they're an Oakman or a Ukeman, what would be on the Ukeman shopping list versus the Oakman shopping list, so to speak.
I don't know. I wouldn't know how to answer that. I mean, when you talk about chainsaw, for example, how many of those orders are for a landscaper who does not do any tree work but needs a chainsaw, and how many are for farmers and everybody else? So kind of hard to filter that out.
Would you say that as an arborist supplier, you got to the point where customers weren't even in the tree care realm anymore? Like you could just as easily have anyone in the green industry buying product from you just because of your notoriety or because you were at good pricing?
I think we had, our share of that, but it was nearly impossible to detect because a lot of tree services order under a person's name,
Okay.
or a worker in a company wants to order their own climbing gaffs outside of the company that they work for. So a lot of tree services, as you know, start that way,
Okay.
and it makes it hard to detect. And of course, companies go out of business and they come and go. It's relatively fluid, but I recall the number of around 30,000 tree services back in the mid 90s. And you weren't always able to identify what was a tree company, um, based on the name, of course.
Right.
But nowadays, I think that's a little more identifiable than it used to be.
Right. Well, you know, you've, I don't know if the right word is left the tree industry. I mean, people retire and move on to life, but you've always kept a connection, even in your semi-retired years. I'm not sure if I should call you retired or semi-retired, but I'll let you speak to that. But you obviously have loved what you do. You've obviously liked the the work you've done. Um, what was it about it that do you think what was it about doing what you did, your career, that kept you going and that has kept you still in touch with it?
Well, people, certainly the people that I know, you guys, other people in the industry. I'll visit a trade show every now and then, but I've been out of the company now for about 12 years. And yeah, it got to a point there. I was just, and we've all, all company owners. I shouldn't say all, but a lot of us get burnt out at some point. And you know, I was always, I think my skill set was not trying to do everything myself, and I always got the right person for the job, and which allowed me to keep doing the catalog every year.
Mm.
Closed in my office while everybody was humming around outside the door, scared to come in Toby's
Yeah,
office. So you'll break his train of thought on whatever the page is he's working on.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that changed, and to the point where I wasn't doing the catalog. I had people doing that, and I just did um, the assembly of the pages, for example. I did the writing for a while, and it came a point where we were seeking a couple of good writers in the industry, Tony being one of them. And I think Tony's done a little writing for the company.
Yeah, I did copy for the catalog for a couple of years when Sean was still involved, putting it together. Worked pretty closely with Sean a few times, and then was even down, did a couple photo shoots. I think I even have the privilege of saying I was a hand model in the Sherrill catalog, which is good because I definitely have a face made for radio.
Well, that's
So yeah.
interesting, Toby, that you connect it to the people. And another thing that you piqued my curiosity on is your comment about finding people to help you. Um, you know, and then tying that to we all reach a point of burnout. You know, is there any advice I can't think of anyone better to give it if you're willing, but you're definitely you've been successful and is there a way that you could pass any of that on in a way of advice to someone that's, when would they know it's time to make a shift like that or to find help or ask for help? And then how do you go about doing that? You got any ways to help people identify how do you know that's happening? What's going on for a person? What was going on for you that made you realize, holy shit, I need some help here?
Well, we were always needing some help, and like I said, I think if I can look back at any skill that I had, it was finding the right people, and Yes, and I always manage to stumble upon the right people. Um, and I did get business advice at one time in the early 2000s about how to manage this growing machine that was going on. And this person's advice was for me to get a president, get someone to handle operations and that I could work with to, draw the big picture. And that was one of the best steps of my career. And it really relieved a lot of issues I was dealing with, trying to do the creative work and run the operations, which was more than one person could do, I'm sure. But so all
Yeah,
that worked
yeah,
out,
yeah.
and found a young lady in Greensboro called Alma Hill. You may remember her.
Hmm.
And man, she did a great job. All the employees loved her. She was kind of CEO or president that, you know, came in the morning and went and visited everybody's desk and found out what was going on and made the plan for the day and headed up the meeting. And so that was a big relief, finding the right people. We advanced up the pole of accountants until we had a certified accountant, and we were able to watch exactly what we were doing and things like that. So I would say that if there's any advice I could give is look for the right people. And if you're one of those people that holds on to everything and wants to oversee and work on every aspect of a business, you're heading for trouble. Of course, I was not that skilled, so that would be my disadvantage. I was not an accountant, and I understood the numbers, and I could work with others and understand what was heading up or heading down. So had those advantages in working the business. But yes, it's I didn't burn out. That was perhaps the good exit for me was that there before the company was traded with the first private equity group. Uh, I was in good. The company was in good shape, and we weren't on a down move. I think that's a problem that happens with a lot of companies is they may trade or something happens that they do it on the downside. That's not a good
Mm,
time to do it.
right, right, right. You made some moves when things when the market was good is what you're saying. It was good times. It wasn't like in a recession of sorts, if you will.
Correct.
Do you feel that recessions impact the tree care industry very much? Like, I mean, I've observed over the years, it seems like, even COVID, so many businesses suffered, but yet the tree industry grew because
Mhm.
of the home nature of it. Has that always been the case? Have you experienced, or was there, like, what would it take for there to be a slump in the tree business?
Boy, things have been relatively level with the tree care industry from as long as I remember. Um, it was a more seasonal business though at one time than it became. It became kind of a level all season
Yeah,
business uh, where before that it was summers were quite busy and the winters for 4 to 5 months of the winter time was very slow. But
right.
I think it's changed for both the tree services and those who serve the tree care industry.
Do you think it's still as common to have companies out there that are doing the tree removal and the firewood, and then doing some removals during the summer, or are you seeing, like you say, do you think more companies as a trend are year round full service tree care?
Year round full service tree care. How about you? You see the same?
Yeah, I think so. I think you still have those that have specialized. Like, I almost even think like firewood's become like a specialty. People are just, that's what they do. They'll gather the wood and split it and make that kind of their primary thing, even rather than trying to dabble in a bunch of stuff. Um, that's that that I has seemed to be somewhat key. I don't know if that's something you'd relate to. It just popped into my head here about, but like trying to stay focused on your core. You guys, I don't know if you ever made decisions with products or, you never dabbled, you dabbled into different realms of arboriculture, but you were always focused on, providing products to a customer.
Serving the industry. That's right.
You never got even into service really, right? Like you didn't service
Well,
chippers or that type of thing. You did you or did you
we
used to do
did.
that?
Yeah, when we were selling larger, we were a bandit dealer for a period of time. Um, Eventually became a more bark dealer, and then I got out of the heavy equipment altogether because the catalog business was doing fine. And banker
I
came
see.
and sat in
Yeah.
front of me at the desk and said, "What the hell have you just done? You just lobbed off half of your business to sell arbor supplies." I said, "Look, I think I can get it back with arbor supplies." And within 2 years, we were back to the same volume, but at a better profit. Just able to run business, and the equipment is rather up and down.
Yeah, and the margins in hardware are going to be not the same, I would think. It'd just be tougher. That's an interesting move you made though. And it's along the lines of what I'm talking about. So you have a successful almost two legs of your business going where but you see the potential in one being greater, but you make that decision, at behest of your banker to go, and what are you doing? You're cutting off one of your feet here. And
You
it's like, no, I think I can
lost your
grow it
mind.
back. I think I can grow
Yeah,
it back and even with a better one. And
yeah.
that's exactly what you did. Do you think that singularity of focus was part of what helped you?
Uh, it was the fact that one of us was making the decisions instead of having, if I had brothers and sisters and one, that's too big a chance to take, or I can't do this or can't do that.
Ah,
My father died in '94, so he never really saw the company um, in its, later iteration where we were much busier and we had a parking lot full of equipment. And then we added another store in Charlotte, and then we added another store in Williamsburg, Virginia, and had all this equipment on hand. And it, to me, it was getting out of control. When it was, boy, you sell somebody a piece of equipment, and they deserve for you to be there and to have good service. And so that was a whole different realm of service to customers that I felt like was getting out of hand. So um, we, at that point, I was like, well, Ken Palmer was the biggest part of this. He and I flew out to Vermeer and proposed a plan to have their dealership served with all the products that they would need. And that was a big step for the company, and walking
right.
away from heavy equipment altogether, and and giving the phone numbers and names of all the potential customers to those two stores, and hoping they could survive on their own, the two stores that we had outside of Greensboro.
Hmm.
And that was all a big step we took, and but it all worked out. And some of the other milestones I recall were when I bought a little building to prefab shed to put behind our building to
Uh-huh.
splice ropes.
Right.
And yeah, you remember that Samson splicing kit
Yeah. Yeah.
back in the late '90s? I took one of those home and learned to splice over several weekends. And once I had it figured out, we bought those shacks and we started splicing rope. And it was from my office to the little shack and making sure. First, there was one guy in there splicing. He was kind of lonely, and then there were two, then there were three,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was a great move back in the '90s. So we got into a little manufacturing at that point, and did some other things like that that helped the company move along
Yeah.
little faster than it was going. But I think really the catalog, and each year trying to make the catalog better and better, and meeting Brian Kotwicka, who lives up
Mm.
in Illinois, and having Brian's talent drawing pictures that he and I could discuss the way that the picture would go, and Brian would draw it up, and we'd make some adjustments, and he'd draw it up again, and that I recall was a great step. For me to tell the story and for the customer to, make sure that catalog's in the bathroom when it gets there. I've had that story told to me many times from tree services at tree shows. That yes, they study the catalog and look really close at the pictures. That's very satisfying.
Yeah, especially from the commode.
From the commode, it's always sitting time.
It's right there beside the well, it's probably the go-to reading for and has been for many, many years. Uh, uh, it was there was a unique, I don't know what the word, I don't know. There was something about it, the way it was laid out and the flow and the interjection of informational tidbits. Uh, you know, it was, would you say there was a time when it was in its heyday? And I don't want to offend you here, but I don't feel like it isn't quite, it's changed from what it was when I really, really remember it. Like there was all anecdotal little stories and there was a lots of bonus material, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah. The problem was having room for the equipment when I was working on it. I've got to cut something out. This is really painful to take out a helpful tip because those tips, how to make the proper cut or using the right gear for the right tree and that sort of thing. There had to be room for it, and it every year a new person's coming into the industry and they need to see this. It's in
Right,
last year's catalog. You take out the proper cut, and suddenly that guy may never see it. And
right,
so
right.
I was cognizant of that and keeping some of those basics of tree care in the catalog. So, um, like I said, I sort of exited the house in 2012. So year after year, it's dwindled a bit, but I think they're working on it. But that's the way it
Well, I
goes.
mean, I don't think it's a function of you leaving entirely, Toby, but I mean that certainly is a part of it. But also the digital age, the way you can access stuff online now, that's the new. I mean, someone actually opening up a catalog and looking at it, sitting like even, we joke about sitting on the commode with your catalog. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm the only person that takes their phone to the bathroom, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. And
Okay, well, point well made. Yeah.
I think that's a lot of the reason, right? Is because of the way people ingest data now and even shop. I mean, it's completely changed. I mean, you order. It's really quite remarkable, though, the amount that we do on our phones. It's just astonishing,
Wow.
and I think that's part of it. I think.
Okay.
I wonder what if you've ever thought. You mentioned your father a couple times, but if he was able to look back, or if he is looking down, um, what would your dad think of what's come of things?
He would be stunned. Yeah. And Dad was even when I was working, he wasn't on the road anymore. So he would come into the office, with his cup of coffee, and he would answer the phone, for example. But he really wasn't engaged in the company when we became, more of an arborist supply house. Which we moved when I first came into the business. We were in his laundry room, and then we rented a little. Rental place in like a strip mall, just to have a area to work and to store equipment. And then we moved to a little bit bigger one, and then we moved to a bigger one, and then we moved to what was our first shop where we had arborist supplies. And yeah, all of those stages, those early stages were when he was around. But
Okay.
the shop that I was speaking of, um, he died in '94, so it was he was often at that shop. But that's the last memory I have of him. And I've got a few pictures. I think there were 6 employees at the time. He would be very proud of what came about. And in those early years, the company name was W.T. Sherrill Incorporated,
Yeah.
which was confused for deputy sheriff when a Southerner called the phone and Ron Turner answered the line. It was deputy sheriff. But so then we changed the name, and then yeah, just those developments. He would be proud to see them. I'm really surprised that the name of the company has stayed with our last name. I always thought that was a mistake because it didn't describe trees or had no tree in it. And actually had an employee who added tree to the end of Sherrill, and it became Sherrill Tree in about 2003. That was a big step. Yeah. So all these little stages of the company have been a lot of fun, and my mother too. She would be quite proud. I lost her when I was 18, so
Okay.
that was a big change.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad that we got able to talk about some of that because I think I think it's good for people to know the origins of things, and it's easy to look at things from a corporate perspective or think that it was always that way, and you quipped about me wearing my John Deere hoodie today, but even if you were to go back to the very roots of any organization, whether it be something as big as John Deere or as something as successful as Sherrill and Sherrill Tree now has gone on to be, which is your family name, it began with like you said, it was in your dad's laundry room and a dream and a passion for people and trees and it goes so far back, you've always had uh, a passion for safety too, or you've believed in it. And it makes sense hearing you talk about, like, I've known you quite a long time now, and I never heard, or I don't remember you talking about watching a guy get struck by. Those are the types of memories that stick with you, especially at that age. And here you are helping bring, relief to that type of potential suffering that occurs out there. Um,
Mhm.
it is part of doing business. I mean, everyone's got to make a living, but um, it's nice to know that there's organizations like Cheryl that started in a dad's laundry room and has gone on to what it's gone on to, and with blood, sweat, and tears, like a family business, no less. I remember Ann taking pictures at tree climbing competitions, and there was a time we even had the same camera, so I figured I was doing pretty damn good because it must be a freaking good camera. When that Sony came out with that Veo, or not the Veo, they came out with that little, I can't remember what number it was, but I had a couple of them. Remember I had the big lens with the small little uh
Dude, nobody's had more cameras than you have.
well but I did have her, and I remember we were somewhere and we had the same camera. I thought it was hilarious. Um but her, family business. I'm getting back to sitting taking pictures in a weekend, and working and then getting them developed and reshooting, and it's part of where it all came from. It all started there, and I think it's that legacy somehow carries forward, and it's good for people to hear. So I thank you for talking with us about that.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate to have Ann with me at that time, and we had Cameron in 2000, our only son, who's now working for Bartlett up in Asheville, North Carolina,
Right.
as a climber, and it's just it's been a dream come true to be attached to this industry, and I'm so proud to have been a part.
Well, it's I've been fortunate in my career to have met you. I don't know when I would have first met you, Toby. Would have been in the early mid '90s for sure. 90, maybe even earlier than that.
Mhm.
I don't know when the heck.
What year with Arbor Master were you?
The first, it would have been 91. when I organized up here. And I think it was 90 or 91 that I went to. Wait a minute. It wouldn't have been 90. Yeah, it was 92 is when I went to Oakland. And then I went to my first TCI 93, I think.
Likely would have been then. I remember meeting Ken and Rip in
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
86, 85 or 86 when they were competing. And yeah, you came in a little later, and
Right.
yeah, we've had some good times. A lot of trade shows, a lot of trade shows.
Were you always were like going to the comps in the ISA show? Was that something you identified early on as part of like a place to meet arborists?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was inspired every time I went. Just like a lot of workers I see that go to these trade events, they're inspired to work further. And if there's anything I can say for a tree service owner, you need that bit of injection into the workforce of being inspired by others. And you've seen a lot of climbers come out of nowhere, perhaps because they went to a competition the year before or the year after. And
Yeah.
yes, some of my funnest trade shows or ISA events were showing up with a catalog that just got off the press and handing it to climbers that I knew, and then hearing back later. That was always a lot of fun, and it kept me going for sure.
That reminded me of a story. I don't know if you remember with Birmingham. It was kind of the unveiling of the Big Shot.
Um, you mean England?
Yeah, it was
Yes.
in England. It was the ITCC. I had competed, and the event was over, and they had a ridiculously high targets in the throwline tree, and the throwline tree hadn't been tore down yet. It was still set up with the ring around it, and the targets were in it. And I was done competing, and I wasn't gonna be going to the Masters, so I was, hanging my head a little. And you said, "Here, take this thing, and go over there and show everybody how this works." Do you remember that?
Vaguely, I remember having it at Birmingham. Yeah.
You handed me the Big Shot, and you said, "Go over the ring and show everybody how to use this thing." And a crowd quickly gathered, a small crowd, and I was, just firing off shots and hitting the high target, which Dan Kraus was the only guy that year that hit it
Yeah.
because it was so ridiculously high, and he had that sidearm whale, that unique. He could so much lever arm, he could whip that
Uh,
thing, and he was the only one that got a ball in that target that comp because they had set it, and everyone was a bit miffed because they had set it higher than it had ever been set before. Somehow they got their wires crossed and thought feet were meters or something. I can't remember. It was pissed off a lot of people, but there I was, Big Shot, and I'll never forget a person from the crowd, never seen it before, never used it, said, "Hey, can I give it a try? It looks fun." And, gave them a little lesson, and boom, first shot, they hit that target. And I just thought to myself, and I've said that story many times when I teach it and show the tool. Because, like, how do you take something that you got the best climbers in the world, one of them can hit this target, and here you could take someone from the crowd, and in a minute lesson,
yeah.
they watch you, you give it to them, and they hit the target. I mean, if that doesn't show you the value of that tool right there, it I was sold on it before then.
And as we all know, the more you use it, the more of an instrument it becomes. And hitting a target high or low, you're able to tune in your cast, and without way overshooting. So when I pick one up once a year now, it just goes way over the tree. I'm like, oh, dial it back. But just like throwing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the other thing you might recall is our chapter held our conference at a golf course one year, and there was 27 holes, and they had 1-9 closed. It wasn't in operate, like it was functional, but they didn't have it open yet. And we asked them if we could have a big shot golf tournament,
There you
and they allowed us. We had putters and big shots. That's it.
go. You sent me
And
pictures, yeah.
yeah, and you sent like a ton of them up, and there's carts with big shots strapped to the roof. only problem with it was it was, I guess it must have been fall, and it had been quite wet. And we left the most abhorrent divots
Ooh.
on the greens, because trying to like if you shoot real high, the ball, like a golf ball coming down from a lot greater height than it normally does, goes further into the
Ooh,
ground.
yeah. That's a
And
fact.
I didn't do a, you know, it was just people running wild with big shots. They could have softened but they just shot high. So it just turned into a high lob instead of a, so chip shots were these 100 foot up,
Ooh.
20-yard distances, like, which you were pulling them out of the turf or out of the greens a couple
Oh.
times. And I don't think we want to use it again as a result of that particular course anyway.
Wow.
Word to the wise. And it was also very interesting, I have to say, is that we still got slices and hooks and everything else, depending on how you held that ball. And again, when you're holding it, and if you just a little bit to the right, it'll and you have a wicked
It spins
slice.
it.
It would, yeah, it wasn't all perfect straight
Mm.
shots. Like I think but we definitely shaved, a dozen strokes or so off, but it wasn't like you were just automatically going to have par golf.
Uh-huh.
You needed to really be careful how you released it and let it go. And I think there's a potential there. There's a potential there. You could a big shot golf course. It's like might go over like disc golf.
That may be due.
Make a different ball or something. Anyways, it's a fun tool, and it's probably you have a few inventions, but that's got to be kind of your capstone or your crown
Yeah,
jewel.
that would be it. Yeah. And a lot of other things are innovations, mostly in, and you look at the overall number of innovations we brought to the catalog, they're from customers, and I always tried to give them credit for what
Hmm.
they gave or came up with. And so many people would call with unpatentable, products that really haven't been proven, and that was always a difficult decision, was picking products that seemed like they would have a lot of customers, and
Right, right.
the climbing gear was not always the the most productive item to go after, because out of each tree company, you're talking 10% of the workforces in the tree.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
all of that.
Well, Tony, what would you say has been your greatest highlight of Sherrill Tree in the catalog and the Big Shot, or anything we've been talking about? What pops up for you when you think of that?
No, it was a twofold thing. One, just as an arborist, getting the catalog was always cool, right? Like it was when it came out, because it was different. Because I remember the old KK catalog, the old Carl Kummerling, and it never changed. It was what it was, you know. And it was fine. And even some of the other catalogs, they were what they were. But the Sherrill catalog was always cool and different. And then as I got more involved in the industry and had the opportunity to work, with just a little bit I did in writing copy, and then helping with the pictures and things like that. It was just neat to be on that side of it for somebody that only ever just climbed trees. And I think back to Dwayne's comment, I think the information that's gotten lost in the catalog, I hope it comes back around, because there's so much information out there now. Some of it's great, some of it's not so much. Via social media, there's no reference point for good information, and the catalog always was, because for a tip or a trick to get put in the Sherrill catalog, it went through a vetting process. It came from qualified individuals, and it was vetted by you, and it was refined, and it was the messages,
Uh,
and that's lost today. Anybody can get on and make a Instagram post of bad pruning and call it good pruning. So I hope that in some respects that it comes back around,
mhm,
because in this industry that so much is learned on the job,
mhm.
there aren't reference sources. There aren't printed reference sources, and the catalog always was that to an extent. And I miss that, and I hope that it can come back around, especially in this age where I
Mhm.
think what's lost by tree workers is the ability to disseminate good information from bad.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the catalog, you didn't have to disseminate
Yeah.
it, because it made it into the catalog. It was probably pretty good. it had been vetted and gone through, like reading the encyclopedia. It's like it had gone through a process and the information was there. So, but yeah, it was. So I was very fortunate in my career to have seen the catalog from both sides as just a consumer, and then also to kind of see how it was put together
Okay.
and then understand.
And I got to say that in these 10 years that I've been absent, right about that time, the SRT was really picking up single rope technique, whatever you're
Hmm.
calling that now, because I've heard so many different names for
Yeah.
what used to be doubled rope technique or single rope technique. That have been a lot of tools to address the single rope technique, or the iteration of climbing both ways when you're in the tree, and it's rather confusing. I'm glad to see that for my son working for Bartlett that they have a said way of climbers working. It's a safe way. It's a good method, and it's not all mechanical. So it's a good approach to climbing, because there could be a fair amount of confusion in the way things are done today. But yes, it was a little easier to package back in the time when it was doubled rope technique, and the leading mechanical device was the ART lock jack.
I think it's that it has changed a lot, but in many ways it stayed very much the same. And
Yeah.
I always say, like, a new product isn't a new. It doesn't if it doesn't solve a problem, it's not new. Um, sometimes it's just painting the wheel a different color, which is fine. I'm not against that, but I still use my Mar bars. Just used them
Okay.
last week.
Mar bars.
People look at me like, "What the hell is that?" I'm like, "Hey, still
Works for
works."
you. Good.
Gets me to the top of the tree just as fast as anything else I've ever done. And I don't get to the top of too many trees anymore, but I'm all right with that.
The Steve and Marie Sillett are climbing giant sequoias virtually every day with a CMI ascender, doing the inchworm, the foot ascenders and the hand ascenders. So nothing has changed there, and they're climbing the biggest trees in the world. So cool. Well, guys, it's been a lot of fun. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, well, thanks, Toby, for being on the show, and I hope that people getting a little insight into the man, the myth, the legend. You're the founder of. We never really did get to there. Would you consider yourself the founder of Sherrill Tree? I mean, I know it was your dad's, but I mean, you took it and morphed it and changed it, and it's not. I don't know where you classify that. Do you call it your dad's business, or do you make a distinction there?
Well, it went from a sort of the jack of all trades approach to hardware, calling on hardware stores, to tree care products sold direct to customers in my time.
And that was the part of the business that really came out of your noodle, so to speak. Those are your roots, and that's your legacy within the Sherrill Tree lineage, I guess.
Yes, but with the permission of Tut Sherrill to buy a computer that costs more than anything he's ever invested in the company, and give it a try. So it all worked out.
So that's interesting. So your dad, he believed in you. Was it a hard sell, or was he like? Because I know what you're saying. Like, going back, I mean, that was a big step. A big step.
Big step. Yeah. Well, he knew that I went and devoted my time in Charleston and had been working the road for a few years before we found the money to make that investment. So he felt confident that I would learn it. And that was in the day of Nintendo, and when we would go home at night, we'd play a game of Nintendo or two. But when I bought a computer, I never put a single game on it. So that helped a lot.
Right. That showed your seriousness. It was all business.
Sure. That would have led nowhere.
Right. Well, there's so many things in our lives that you can go back, and it's relatively easy to pinpoint key points or key decisions and times where things made the difference. And that's had you not done that and had you not got that computer at that time, who knows where things would have gone. Maybe we would have went there eventually or not. But that was, and then even where was Anne in that part of the thing?
We married in 87. And so it's just a couple of years after we were married that
Yeah.
I got the computer and started the computer. In fact, we sold our house before we had another house. So we had to move in with Ann's mom. And at that time, she had an extra room. And I set the computer up in that room next to our bedroom. And that way I could just close the door and chip away at it. And it was, and wait for a picture to download. It would take, for a 5 meg picture, it might take 20 minutes for it to upload, especially putting it onto a floppy disk. So, it was just a lot of time spent learning to use a computer.
We always ask people, or often ask climbers, if they remember their first harness and their first saddle. And it's, I think, quite appropriate that with you, we end up talking about your first computer. But what was it? I think I'd be remiss if we didn't ask, what was the computer, what model or what program? You said program, but
I think it was a Macintosh SI2, and each year they would like double the amount of information or process speed of the hard drive, and so I was buying a new computer every 2 years or so. But yeah, it was a Macintosh SI, and I was a Mac guy. The point and click, and a lot of working around the photographs to carve out the bad material and stuff. I spent a lot of time doing that. A lot of computer equipment for sure. But PageMaker and Photoshop were the two programs that I used quite often.
And they work well with Macintosh.
Yeah, they were pretty much Macintosh programs. I'm not sure they even made that for a PC.
They do now. I don't know if they did what they did back then or not.
Well, not PageMaker. That program was actually dropped.
Yeah.
And we went to InDesign in probably 98 or somewhere around there. So the programs would, it was odd that they would just totally drop a program and any support for it. And you had to learn, the next step. And I don't think it's InDesign anymore. But I'm not doing layout.
What are you running for computer
I
these
have
days?
Macintosh tools, but I have no computer. I do have. I take it back. I have a laptop that I visit every couple weeks, but for the most part, I'm on an iPad or on my phone.
Yeah, that's the same as we have. Really gravitated away from my phone. They do so much. It seems almost silly, but I'm definitely transferred into the phone era. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.